Thank you. If I told that 5-year-old self to dream big because one day she'd be able to make those dreams come true, she would think that it was some kind of crazy fairy tale. But I stand here today having made some of those dreams come true. I'm Jenny Bewes, founder, CEO, and chief pilot of aerospace company iJetpack Aeronautics. I'm still the same imaginative 5-year-old that I was back then from a small rural town in England, daring to challenge the notion of impossible. But time has added many different layers of experience and titles, from a high school dropout to a Harvard graduate, from a pot washer to a hotel manager, from an EA to a digital and transformation leader, and from a pilot to an aerospace engineer. I view my life in chapters. Each provide different lessons, enabling the transition to the next. The first 3, in accumulation, have enabled a huge leap of faith into my current chapter, chapter 4. Tonight, I'm here to share a story of discovering and implementing 6 invaluable life lessons that enabled me to take the big leap of faith, demonstrating that even amidst the angriest of storms, with unyielding spirit, we can all learn to fly. Click. So lesson 1 came from the early days. I was the youngest of 2 daughters to teenage parents, and I was given the freedom to choose my own adventure, not only in the books that I really loved, but in real life too. We had the freedom to explore the forests and farmlands without any adult guidance, and with no mobile phones, because mobile phones didn't exist then. The adventures and the numerous accidents that I would have would teach me self-accountability for my choices and the consequences of those choices. At home, I was addicted to the digital version of Choose Your Own Adventure, also known as computer games, in their, albeit back then, they were in their highly pixelated green and black glory. I'd spend hours experimenting on making different choices to experience different outcomes. At 8 years old, I really wanted to understand, how did those things work? And so I taught myself the language, sparking a huge passion for coding. Both of these interactions involved lots of failure, learning, adapting, progressing, and repeating many, many, many times, until eventually I got the outcome that I'd want. It developed my preference for practical, error-based learning rather than the theoretical error avoidance learning that was so popular in schools. Lesson 2 was much more human. Being a misfit in my teenage years, I was naturally drawn to other misfits. Between the age of 15 and 18, 6 of my misfit friends died of unnatural circumstances. 1, a violent, homeless heroin addict, shunned by society. After many months building trust with him, he opened up his vulnerable soul and for the first time voiced how he'd been sexually and physically abused by his own parents. It resulted in him running away from home, becoming homeless, and using drugs to escape his trauma. His violence was his choice in response to the society that he felt had rejected him. All he really needed was somebody to listen, understand, and care. It taught me to be mindful of really shallow judgment and to do whatever I could to help ignite the support the possibility in others. Lesson 3 was through my early career. It never really occurred to me that my passion for coding could actually become a career. I was a high school dropout. Who would employ a high school dropout that hadn't had the formal education for her experience in coding? But I continued advancing my coding experience while separately exploring the industries and roles to figure out my career. Temping as an EA to the marketing director of CompuServe, pre-Google era, yeah, I'm that old, my boss saw the websites and forums that I'd created and the international community that I'd garnered way before social media was even a word. Impressed, she asked me to lead the web development of CompuServe's infotainment portal. I was momentarily wowed and then absolutely petrified, overcome with self-doubt. But it was her unwavering confidence and my high respect for her that coaxed me to step forward into the unknown despite my fear. She was the first in a series of leaders to have more faith in me than I had in myself. Eventually, I would realize that I can achieve much more than I would even give myself credit. She taught me that impossible is just a mindset, a possibility waiting to happen, and that cheerleaders are invaluable in prompting us to step out of our own comfort zone and into our growth zone. I vowed to be a cheerleader, even if it meant doing anxiety-inducing things like talking here on stage. So I progressed well in corporate. The ever-changing problems to solve in order to innovate was not just a career, it was a passion. And this passion made me fight much, much harder than others to overcome the obstacles that many others would give up on. However, after 2 decades of innovating within the corporate constraints, my learning had worn thin. I discovered consistent patterns across industries and across functions. And while the content and the language changed, the frameworks were pretty much the same. I'd hit a learning plateau, and my passion began to fade. I initially filled the gap with a criminology degree, as you do, but I became overloaded. It was costing me the time with my family, and for what? I mean, yeah, I was being paid a lot of money, but without passion and purpose, I was deeply unfulfilled and unhappy. I really needed a break. Little did I know that this break would be the catalyst of my career transformation. I took my first helicopter ride to a remote mountain in Maui. I'm smiling now because I remember that bit. It's like, oh, this is so cool. And I had the intense feeling of feeling centered. I'd heard the word before, but never really felt it. Not in this way. It cauterized the deep chaos and conflict of my work in my mind, and I knew that I had to make this part of my life. So in my work life, increasing numbers of people had told me, you should write a business book. And I was like, yeah, whatever, not interested, but yeah, thanks, very nice. So I thought, I know, I'll put 2 and 2 together. And I told them, I'm going to write a business book at the top of a mountain, accessible only by helicopter. Yeah, kept them a little bit more quiet then. And with that, not being one for words without actions, I signed up to flight school and then discovered an insane passion for helicopters. Fucking love them. Make passion a profession, I used to always say to my team members, and I meant it because I had the passion back then. But now I'd found this new passion, and I knew it was time for me to live my own words, to remove the training wheels of the corporate world, quit my career, jump into the unknown, no clear plan, but experience telling me I'd somehow figure it out. But with every change, every big change, comes great sacrifice. With no income for the foreseeable future, I'd have to sacrifice the lifestyle that I had that was dependent on it. My childhood sweetheart and then husband didn't want to change. After 25 years of being together, we'd reached a junction, with our desired paths taking very different directions. We made the heartbreaking but respectful decision to separate, much to the devastation of our children. My resilience was tested to its absolute limit and beyond on many times. My family was broken, I had no job, had no income, very few contacts, and no experience in this new industry that I was looking at. It appeared, as I'd often overheard said, a completely reckless decision. If I'd had a big red button to exit this world at that time, I would have pushed it many times. But this was a choice. It was a choice that I could change, but despite the void of evidence and the sea of judgment, my inner self reassured me to continue. I call this inner self my housemate. Unlike my 5-year-old self, my housemate is non-emotional, highly logical, and annoyingly rational. On my best days, I do everything to shut her out. But on my darkest days, she's my guiding force of strength, reminding me to stop the self-doubt and stop the self-pity, because I've proven success in making progress without answers, role-playing, altering my perspectives, and adapting my mindset to overcome stubborn barriers. And she also reminds of the great privilege that I have versus others in the world, living in a country that's not war-torn, a roof over my head, health on my side. She always brings me back from the edge and away from self-pity, but it did nothing to reduce the excruciating pain of knowing that my path to happiness meant causing great grief to my loved ones. And not helped by my so-called friends having alienated me to side with my partner based off the back of false stories that I chose not to correct. The silence of the isolation was deafening, but surfaced a significant realization. Stripped bare of titles and the mask that I had worn for so long, I was confronted by a stranger looking back at me in the mirror. Who was I? I was tempted to run back to the comfort, but I trusted my housemate and instead pushed harder into the destabilizing intensity of the void to learn more about myself. What I discovered was a vulnerable human trying to run an outdated operating system in her new environment. I had to unravel my code to figure out where to change it. So I paid great attention to the subconscious algorithm behind my decisions, challenging my assumptions and then forcibly changing them. Despite the significant awkwardness in doing things against my natural will, I tell you, it's really strange when your head's going, what are you doing? And you're still on your way doing it. But it produced astonishing new opportunities, like flying a helicopter around the entire coast of Australia with a complete stranger, partnering with NASA, and going to Harvard. Realizing that these dream opportunities were only prevented by my algorithm that I could change, I now had a bigger problem. If this meant that I could do anything in the world, what would I do? Sharing my dilemma with my cheerleader, former boss, and great friend, I asked him, what would you do? If you could do anything in the world, what would you do? And he, like others that I'd asked before, said to me, I'd be an astronaut. I was like, I can't think of anything worse than being cooped up in a vessel for months on end doing routine things. Nah, not for me. He said, okay, so what would you do? I said, I'd fly a jetpack around Australia. And he's known me for a long time. So without blinking an eyelid, he just said, yeah, so why don't you? It was a good point. If I believe that impossible is just a possibility waiting to happen, and that anyone can achieve it just by adapting their mindset, then shit, why not prove it? After a year of research and planning, I applied to Guinness World Records for the fastest journey across Australia by Jetpack. It would be the ultimate test of mindset adaptation, as I wouldn't be able to succeed without overcoming my lifelong aversion to exercise. Hate it, really hate it. I would have to physically bear up to 180 kilos of thrust through my shoulders for 15 flights every day for 60 days, through mountains, forests, deserts, and lakes, from Perth to Sydney, a distance further than the diameter of the moon. With viability, feasibility, and a plan all validated, I went to California, heart pumping with excitement, and became the second woman in the world to fly a jetpack, and the first person in the world to burn a hole through her ankle despite 6 layers of protective clothing. I couldn't walk for a few months, but it didn't deter me. That's the picture of me trying to have a bucket of water to cool down the burn that I had in there, but as soon as I put my leg in there, all the clothing had covered up again, so the water wouldn't get in. Trying to tell people when you've got your hands on a jetpack that something's burning is not that easy, by the way. The jetpack was quite challenging to fly, though. It's got a single plane of thrust, and any small, uncommanded leg movements produces a rapid change in flight direction, often resulting in loss of control. And while I'd likely managed to overcome that with more training, the risk of an accident would increase with the fatigue that I was inevitably going to experience going across from Perth to Sydney. So I'd be better off mitigating that risk if possible. I'd previously dismissed the jet suit that I'd seen debuted at the TED conference for its seeming high demand on physical strength. But it appeared to address the single plane of thrust problem by triangulating it, more like riding a tricycle than a unicycle. Given my assumptions had now been proven incorrect so many times, I sent myself to England to put them to the test. And then it hit me. As I lowered down my arms to take off, I had a major flashback of a recurring childhood dream where I would do exactly the same, pushing my arms down to fly away from the torment beneath me. That was it. I knew this had to be it. And while my assumption for strength, the need for strength, was validated, it paled into insignificance with my sights set firmly on realizing my childhood dream. And then COVID. My plans for training were stopped, and I predicted that the borders would be shut for at least 12 months. Without an income, I couldn't wait that long. So I leveled up the game. I know, I'll design, build, and fly a jet suit. I mean, how hard could that be? And a world record's not enough anyway, so. Equipped with only myself, Dr. Google, and the proceeds remaining from my house, I set up iJetpack Aeronautics with a bold vision to transform human capability towards a mentally and physically superhuman society, paying homage to the lessons that I'd learned from my childhood and the new passions that I'd gained. The first step would be to inspire others to think beyond their limits, leading by example by producing a jetpack and flying it in a world record attempt. And it would take me 6 really frustrating months to find the person to help build it. An RAAF engineer who self-built and flew a rocket belt fueled by his own homemade rocket fuel, the perfect match. You should see the thing that he actually creates this rocket fuel. It's like some kind of massive chemistry lab with a like 10-foot high distillery. Super cool, if you're geeky. I presume we're all quite geeky here, actually, being Anyway. So my learning gap was quickly replaced by a fire hydrant of learning in areas that I'd never been exposed. I had to self-teach 3D CAD, additive and traditional manufacturing, the unique properties of differing materials, mechanics, electronics, international supply chains, government grants, even architectural design. And all of this on top of what at the same time I was progressing the areas that I did know: strategy, branding, web development, partnerships, legislation. But 9 intense months later, our first baby was born. With a gap in the travel bans, I headed to Brisbane to meet my engineer face-to-face for the very first time. Very relieved that he wasn't some kind of scammer that I'd been sending tens of thousands of dollars of equipment to. I strapped the bomb-looking prototype to my body before igniting the 6 turbojet engines and completing an almost perfect first test flight. Well, apart from it skipping its RPM limits and taking itself to full RPM, thrusting me quite literally to the end of my tether, before spinning me around like Wonder Woman, the ground crew were helplessly dodging the spinning flames, faces aghast, not really knowing quite what to do. But their faces quickly changed to laughter when I removed my helmet, and I was like, that was fucking awesome! This success was first of many, but the struggles that they were built on were many, many more. Further lockdowns made life difficult with our interstate divide, but not giving in, we shifted our focus and used our homebound time to deliver our shiny new MVP, the IJ6180, the most powerful jet suit in the world. It's got 6 mini turbojet engines, 2 on each arm and 2 on the back, that can lift up to 180 kilos of thrust, reach speeds in excess of 150 kilometers an hour, and access areas that no land or manned aircraft can reach. But above all, it's the gobsmacking thrill of Iron Man-like flight in a way that I had dreamed of as a child that makes it so incredible. Being a huge advocate for safety and risk mitigation, and not the risk taker that most people would assume I am, I also authored a full training curriculum, pre and post flight checklists, a safety management system, and an interactive mobile app. Not forgetting the Flight Academy at Sydney Motorsport Park, consisting of a purpose-built flight training stage, a converted shipping container with a workshop and a briefing room. Both of those I custom designed and project managed myself. I learned international manufacturing processes, the joy of sea freighting, and the hands-on construction work. I got hands-on under the guidance of experts. But the pivotal moment of my entire career came when I was testing the comprehension of the training documentation that I'd created on somebody who had never flown an aircraft before, my 20-year-old son. Probably wasn't the best idea to put your own kid on a jetpack, but anyway, I did it. An hour after briefing and validating his understanding, he put on the jet suit and started the engines. To my surprise and delight, he gained control in the first 3 minutes, traversing the stage, one end to the next, managing to do the turns, and even correcting a near loss of control. I was absolutely elated. And then, ready to step up the power settings on the engines failed. It's an issue that cost us months to fix and wrote off a potentially game-changing meeting that we had to demonstrate to the Department of Defense. And if that weren't enough, a couple days later, I received a call telling me that the academy had been smashed into by a car. Video footage showing that a negligent driver had left his car at the top of the entry hill out of gear, and it came down and smashed through the perimeter fence into the stage and moved a 2.5-ton stage a few meters back. The damage was irreparable, and the driver, realizing, drove away from the scene and denied all responsibility. Having been on such a tight budget, to get us to the upcoming demonstration, the consequence was financially crippling. My dream had just been crushed. My resilience, already volatile, having just bounced back from overcoming the significant damage that an alleged welder caused to our shipping container, resulting in a need for me to redesign that. And so the next call that I received really felt like a knockout. My mum called from England. Distraught, she told me she had a rare cancer and it required immediate surgery. Scared she might not make it through, I knew I had to find the funds to go there and be there by her side. Thankfully, the surgery did go well, despite a long recovery ahead. But my financial situation, not so much. With my ability to afford my rent now on the line, I resigned to the fact that I would have to go backwards to go forwards. With resilience nearly depleted, and the thought of returning to the corporate world hit me hard. But my housemate told me to get over myself and remember the privilege of even having that opportunity, and that I might just even like it. Well, as usual, my annoying housemate was right. I realized that helping large groups of people think differently to solve complex problems again was a great joy. And I got the well-needed respite from the comfort of being in a very familiar environment that I found really easy to navigate. But I was struck by just how much potential rested amongst this group of humans, huge group of humans. Only imagining what I could achieve with iJetpack if I had that much talent available. The experience not only filled a financial need, but it renewed my self-esteem and revitalized my focus. While I'd been reluctant to monetize my baby, it was a mindset I needed to shift to enable the resources that could far more rapidly accelerate us towards our purpose and realize our vision. My imagination ran wild with the possibility of what we could do. And with that, a shift in focus towards revenue generation led us to where we are today. So we're embarking on a new design that will meet the demand of the entertainment industry, who have hounded us to do air shows and stunts. So we're developing an international travel-sized jet suit that I can take with us on the plane. It would still enable us to inspire people, just slightly different way. To add to the hack, I'd confront my perfectionism, most notably proven being excessive when winning Best in Show for a product I was forced to launch live on stage in Singapore, despite considering it only 60% ready. And so we've committed to an international debut of the events jetsuit in New Zealand on March the 29th, despite my confidence being well below 80%. That we'll make it, but just don't tell them that, and don't send the video over there. The roller coaster of challenge, temporal fear, and ultimate elation is the very essence of every great adventure, and it remains truly part of ours too. The financial strains are still very real, but with my newfound ability to hack my own operating system, and with my cheerleader, my housemate, and trusty engineer within easy reach, my resilience in embracing the highs and lows of my very own choose-your-own-adventure is stronger now than ever. And it's amplified tenfold when I see the reward of seeing our vision of igniting the possibility in others come to life. These images, sent to me by a very proud father whose son was so inspired by my story on a Netflix commercial that he'd seen, that he took himself to his room, spent hours planning, designing, and building a jetpack of his own to make his favorite bear now a flightful bear. These kind of stories are, for me, the true meaning of success. So, I'm mid-chapter 4, and the world record now is redrafted to chapter 5. But what's my biggest learning? My biggest learning is that the hardest yet most transformative thing to master is not technology, it's self. We all have dreams and incredible potential within us. We're not limited by our circumstances. We're limited only by the way that we choose to perceive them. With passion, perseverance, and a willingness to adapt our mindset, we can turn even the wildest of dreams into reality. Perhaps, if we all just reached beyond our status quo, we might all learn to fly. Per ardua ad astra. Thank you.